Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger is out with a new book, Leadership, 6 Studies in World Strategy. At the age of 99, he's still active on the world stage and creating controversy with comments about Ukraine that drew fire from President Zelenskyy. I began by asking about how leaders are made. No one in our time, I think, has met with such an intimate and substantive contact with so many world leaders, and you've distilled it, what you've learned in the book, Leadership. I guess one big conclusion I took away from the book is it seems like you're pretty convinced that leaders are made, not born.
I think leaders, in a way, make themselves, and they probably have some innate qualities, but I think it's probably correct to say they make themselves.
Richard Nixon makes the list despite the fact that he's the only American president ever forced to resign. How do you explain that?
And I put that fact in the first sentence.
Yes, I remember.
Of the chapter on him. Nixon was a distinguished leader in foreign policy, and he used an approach that was more typical of the British approach to foreign policy, that is to say, the emphasis on the balance of power and an understanding that when you have two adversaries, namely the Soviet Union and China, an effort should be made to separate them and treat them differently, pick a position closer to them, each of them, than they are to each other.
Triangulation.
Triangulation.
I interviewed you 25 years ago on the 25th anniversary of Richard Nixon's resignation. We're now at the 50th anniversary of Watergate. At the time, you told me about the night before he resigned where you said, Mr. President, history is going to treat you more kindly than the present day. Do you still believe that?
Well, I said to him, history will treat you better than your contemporaries did. I believe that.
It's held up?
His foreign policy has held up, and he was quite effective in domestic policy. He permitted himself to get involved in a number of steps that were inappropriate for a president, and he himself has admitted that afterwards. But they were concerned with really domestic politics.
But weren't they issues of character?
Nixon was a complicated person, but in moments of crisis, he made courageous decisions.
I want to ask you about a recent controversy. When you were speaking to the Davos group, you talked about the situation in Ukraine and suggested that negotiations, this was 2 months ago, would have to begin about now, by early July, that would eventually lead to something like a situation like that we had in 2014. President Zelenskyy said you were appeasing. Were you misinterpreted? What did you make of his response?
He seems to agree with the outcome that I mentioned. My point was that the best place for a ceasefire is a return to the status quo ante, which is to where the war started. So then the Russians would have been thwarted in their attempt to take over Ukraine. What the Ukrainian president objected to was that he thought I was saying that a part of territory that the Russians had occupied 10 years earlier and which had been tolerated by the rest of the world should also be part of a ceasefire settlement.
You talked about the leaders who held elective office, who led their societies. How about as an advisor, as a cabinet member? What prepares you?
When I was, say, 15 in Germany, it never occurred to me that someday I might be Secretary of State of the United States.
What did you think you were going to be?
Well, you know, I was a member of a discriminated minority, so it did not lend itself to career thinking.
Survival.
If anything prepared me for it, it is having lived through chaos, then having lived through the war, and having seen very complex and dangerous situations, and to develop the conviction that it was an extraordinary fate and therefore obligation to do the best I was capable of doing.
Any key decisions you would take back today?
You know, that's a question I'm often asked. I have developed no great answer for it because I've been thinking about these problems all my life. It's my hobby as well as my occupation. And so the recommendations I made were the best of which I was then capable.
Dr. Kissinger, thank you. Henry Kissinger's new book, Leadership, 6 Studies in World Strategy, is available today. And for more of my interview, check out the special Henry Kissinger, Life and Leadership. It's streaming tonight on ABC News Live at 8:30 Eastern, 9:30 Pacific, and on Hulu.
Well, hey there, GMA fans. Robin Roberts here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Lots of great stuff here. So go on, click the subscribe button right over here to get more of awesome videos and content from GMA every day, anytime. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the morning on GMA.